I don't see it.
Plain as day.
Where?
They've all seen it.
Tell me.
Clean as the news.
Tell me.
Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. So this is my breakdown for Sherlock Series 3, Episode 1, Empty Hearse that I've been promising you guys for the last couple of days. What I did is just watch the episode many times to just try and find as many references as possible and, facts about behind the scenes production. So this will be just a little bit different from my normal Easter egg videos. If you haven't been following me on social either, I've been talking about Anime Club today, so there's a bunch of other stuff going on this weekend in addition to Episode 2 airing tomorrow. I'll be posting my review for that right after the episode airs, so be sure to subscribe to get it. So since this breakdown has really specific details about the plot and what goes on during Empty Hearse, consider it super spoilery, so careful if you haven't watched the episode yet. So here we go, blowing the doors off the Empty Hearse. Number 1, the title is a reference to the Conan Doyle story, The Empty House. Both this episode and that book brought the character back from the dead, so to speak. Doyle killed the character in his novel, The Final Problem. The character was so popular that fans and his publisher compelled him to bring the character back, which led to The Adventures of the Empty House. So if anyone didn't like that there was so much fan service in episode 1, remember that Conan Doyle's novel, Empty House, was essentially written as fan service. 2. Sherlock Lives theories. We don't learn that what we're seeing is Anderson's theory until the last frame cuts after his first scenario. Let me know below in the comments how long it took you to figure it out. I didn't realize until the Molly kiss, but the weird dance track made me very suspicious. Plus there's the fact that Darren Brown is actually a famous real-life hypnotist. Sherlock tells Watson later that there are 13 possibilities of how he could survive. There's a big debate going on in the fandom as to whether he meant 13 ways he could have faked his death, or just 13 ways that he could have escaped Moriarty. Most of those theories presume that he never suspected Moriarty would be so committed to his plan that he'd kill himself in order to force Sherlock's hand. All of the scenarios were filmed in broad daylight with a full crowd of reporters and people watching, and no one leaked any of the information, but there were a few pictures that made it to Tumblr. Number 3, Moriarty returns. Andrew Scott, who plays Moriarty, appears in all the rooftop scenarios. All those scenes were filmed during Series 3 production, meaning that he came back on set. Early on, people leaked that he would be part of the new episodes, kind of misleading people into thinking that he did not die on top of the roof. Later we learned that he did in fact die from that gunshot wound, but people keep asking me what happened to his body. Because Sherlock and Mycroft were one step ahead of Moriarty the whole time, they basically had a government crew ready to take the body into custody. Number 4, Mycroft knew the whole time. After Lestrade calls Anderson on his crackpot theory, the press montage lets us know that everyone ended up learning the real truth about what Moriarty did. Because Sherlock and Mycroft wanted to stay one step ahead of Moriarty, they let him discredit Sherlock. So whenever Sherlock finished getting rid of Moriarty's terror network, there was no more reason to keep up the deception, which is why the press are just now figuring out the truth. Number 5, Mustache Watch begins. We see Watson with the caterpillar on his lip and Mary Morstand. Freeman was actually on loan to Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss for 6 weeks to film the first 2 episodes. This is just because filming on Sherlock Series 3 started while production on The Hobbit was still going on, and Martin Freeman was still under contract to Peter Jackson. The mustache, as well as other people's facial hair like Anderson's, is just a sign that they've let themselves go since they believe Sherlock has been dead the last 2 years. Watson even explains to Mrs. Hudson that he never called her just because he let a lot of things slide, mostly shaving his upper lip. Number 6, Mary Morstand. Mary is played by Amanda Abington, Martin Freeman's real-life partner. If you haven't seen them together, they're pretty adorable. Number 7, Sherlock on the Cross. The Russian base Sherlock got caught breaking into was the last place he went to dismantle Moriarty's terror cell. As a character, he's kind of regressed emotionally because he's been on his own for these past 2 years. Number 8, Mycroft in the field. The Mycroft character in the books is much more isolated than Mark Gatiss' version, so even though he complains about having to go in the field to save Sherlock, it's actually a huge deal that his character did that. You learn later that Mycroft is actually much smarter than Sherlock, and that when they were growing up, Sherlock thought he was stupid by comparison. That is, until they met other children and Sherlock realized that they were very different. You can think of Mycroft and Sherlock like a sliding scale of weirdness and intellect. So Sherlock is brilliant, but he can coexist with other human beings. Mycroft is a genius and totally can't stand people. Number 9, Back to London. The terror plot that brings Sherlock back to London got a lot of complaints from fans. Mark Gatiss used the Sebastian Moran character as part of that tube bomb plot, and in the episode, the character kinda gets pushed to the side. In the novels, Sebastian Moran is like an evil version of Watson. They both served in the military, but Sebastian met Moriarty instead of meeting Sherlock. So imagine what would have happened to Watson if after he left Afghanistan, he would have met Moriarty first instead of meeting Sherlock. There's a really interesting parallel in the relationship between Moran and Moriarty and the relationship between Sherlock and Watson, but that doesn't really come across during this episode. A lot of people actually confuse Molly's fiancé with the sniper from Reichenbach Fall. That sniper was actually an homage to the Moran character from the novels, but in episode 1, the Moran character is a government official. Sherlock also calls Moran the head rat. That's actually a reference to the Holmes adventure that was talked about but never happened in the books. It's called the Giant Rat of Sumatra. It's also a street near Bullenbush in West Hampstead, for which platforms and staircases were built, but no above ground entry. Number 10, the tube is wonky. A lot of people noticed that the plotting in the maps of the London Tube were all wrong. This was actually done on purpose. The maps of the tube are heavily copyrighted, and no one is ever allowed to use them in film or TV. Number 11, mustache references. I know I promised to try and count all the mustache jokes. I counted about 20 total over the course of the episode. There was a group of 3, then another group of 3, then a group of 7, and then a group of 6. So they all happened in spurts. Number 12, John Locke for the win. When Watson tells Mrs. Hudson that he's getting engaged, she genuinely thought that he and Sherlock had been a couple that whole time they were together, which is hilarious. It also pays homage to the subtext that the fandom has always really read into those characters. Number 13, the upturned collar. The first time Sherlock puts the jacket back on is the first time the Game Is On theme stirs. It doesn't play in full until he re-enters Baker Street, much to the screams of Mrs. Hudson. Number 14, the reunion. Sherlock disguises himself trying to find a clever way to let Watson know that he's still alive. This is a joke about the character's master of disguise persona. The real joke is that Watson doesn't even notice him at first. Notice the 3 diamonds on Watson's engagement ring. They're a subtle reference to the Three's Company situation of their characters, as well as the wedding episode, The Sign of Three, that's coming next. It's almost as if Mary will be marrying Watson and Sherlock, or marrying Watson and gaining a Sherlock. Later in the episode, whenever Watson tries to rip the beard off a patient, it's also a reference to the Holmes character in the novels. The titles of the DVDs that the character in the episode tries to give to Watson are the same titles of the books that the original Holmes character tried to sell to Watson. Number 15, the headbutt. Watson attacks Sherlock with a headbutt in one of the progressively dirtier restaurants that they get thrown out of. In the original story, Watson fainted when Holmes reappeared. 16, Mary is a liar. Sherlock deduces Mary and sees that she's a liar. There's a lot of theories, but most of this will tie in with episode 2, The Sign of Three. When you see Mary talking to Sherlock later in the episode, you see the date reference for May 11th, 2013. Later in the episode, Mary mentions that her wedding to Watson is in May, meaning that she is definitely tied up with a villain, but that does not necessarily make her an evil character. Number 17, London is a cesspool. Sherlock's voiceover speech is taken directly from something Watson wrote during the original book story, Study in Scarlet. Number 18, Doctor Who references. Notice that the round things on the wallpaper of Mr. Shilcott's apartment resemble the round things of the TARDIS. Then there's the codename of Sherlock and Mycroft's plan, Lazarus. That's the same name of an episode of Doctor Who that Mark Gatiss wrote and starred in. And then there's the TARDIS on Anderson's wall. Number 19, Remember the 5th of November. This is a reference to Guy Fawkes Day, who was remembered for the gunpowder plot of 1605, which served as inspiration for the 2-bomb plot. Number 20, Sherlock's parents. A lot of people recognize that Sherlock's parents are Benedict Cumberbatch's real-life parents. But did you notice that the collar on his mother's coat is turned up, meaning that Sherlock got his trademark upturned collar from his mother? Sherlock Holmes, what a mama's boy. Number 21, the final explanation. Mark Gatiss explained that even though this wasn't completely correct, it was the most plausible explanation for how Sherlock survived the fall. Since I'm sure there are a ton of references that you guys may have caught that I might have missed, be sure to write them in the comments if you didn't see them in my video. I'll be posting my review of episode 2, The Sign of Three, right after the episode airs tomorrow. Be sure to subscribe to get it. I'll also be taking questions in the comments to include in my Q&A video for Monday too. So if you want me to answer one of your questions in a Q&A video, just write it in the comments for my review of Sign of Three. A couple days after that, I'll also post a breakdown video just like this. Right now, click here to get my Q&A for Empty Hearse, and click here to get my review of the episode. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys tonight. High fives.